A bill in the Minnesota Senate that would allow schools in the state to voluntarily display the national motto, "In God We Trust," has state Democrats spiraling into fits of outrage because God offends them. By waging war on God, they are showing contempt for people of faith and disregard for the history of our country. On the floor of the Minnesota Senate, Democratic Sen. Scott Dibble suggested using Allah in place of God, as in Allah We Trust. Dibble wondered how the bill's sponsor, Republican Sen. Dan Hall, would react, since the words God and Allah, an Arabic word, mean the same thing. Here's a little history lesson for Dibble. "In God We Trust" was recognized as our nation's motto more than 200 years ago when Francis Scott Key penned it in The Star-Spangled Banner, as he watched the Battle of Fort McHenry during the War of 1812. He wrote, "And this be our motto, in God is our trust," so this motto goes almost as far back as the founding of our country. It's very much ingrained in our heritage. Note the humility of this statement. Key was saying that the United States, a very young country at war again with a nation from which it won its independence, defers its destiny to a higher power. God is one of the most unifying and inclusive aspects of America. The term is used by many religions to reference the Supreme Being. Christians, Jews and Muslims all refer to the higher power they worship as God, with variants in different languages all having the identical meaning. The Democratic Party has been completely hijacked by political correctness, which is one of the reasons Donald Trump was elected president. Voters saw the assault on their religious freedoms and the war on God and people of faith by the Democrats. That's why the faith community has rallied behind this president so intently. There is something very dangerous about having to attack people of faith or any expression of faith, and yet Democrats continue to travel down this road, abandoning a large portion of their voting base in the process. Who can forget when God was literally booed at the Democratic National Convention in 2012? The Democrats removed recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital, and God from their party platform, and then moved to add the references back in after concerns about losing Jewish voters and Christian independent voters. However, when they added the references back in a voice vote, the move was met with loud boos on the floor of the convention. It's worth noting that Charlotte, North Carolina, where the 2012 Democratic National Convention was held, is the same city where we recently saw the funeral service for the Rev. Billy Graham, who spoke at President Bill Clinton's first inauguration in 1993. It's a sad commentary on the Democratic Party that it went from welcoming one of the most influential religious figures in America at the Clinton inaugural to booing God at its convention just 19 years later. The more Democrats want to take God out of our daily lives, and our children's lives, the more they expose themselves as extremists who want to take our country down a very destructive path. This is where they completely lose honest, hard-working, law-abiding people of faith. Protesting the bill to allow display of the "In God We Trust" national motto, Democratic State Sen. John Marty said, "The money in my wallet has to say, 'In God We Trust.' I think that's offensive." Marty could certainly make a donation to any number of good causes that wouldn't find his money offensive. Perhaps he should start with his local school. Teachers are underpaid and always forced to reach into their own wallets for classroom supplies, which add up quickly. I'm sure they would welcome the generosity of the money that so offends the senator. What many parents find offensive are politicians like Marty, whose salaries and office staff are paid for by the taxpayers. With the many problems plaguing our public schools, safety and security being the biggest, why are Democrats like Marty working overtime trying to keep God out of schools rather than focusing on keeping kids safe in schools? Republican Sen. Hall said he sponsored the In God We Trust legislation to bring back respect, which has been lost. Hall said, "We've lost a lot of respect for those things in life that we should be respecting. I'd only assume that if you take those things out of government, if you take the things that are respectful out, you're going to put in something different. That's exactly what has happened. The further we've moved away from God in our schools, the more he's been replaced by the extreme indoctrination of our kids with teaching and programs that completely undercut what families teach their children at home. Nobody seems to care that parents are offended that many schools are no longer interested in partnering with them and instead are undermining them as the primary authority in the lives of their children. Political correctness has infected schools to the point where priorities are out of whack. Our schools lack the security they desperately need, teachers are underpaid, and yet politicians ignore these real issues and, instead, pick fights with people of faith. As the Democrats' war on God wages on, the political consequences for them will only be secondary to what this will say about us as a nation. Openly attacking God or people of faith is the only form of acceptable bigotry left in this country. If God is our problem, what is the answer?